Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, feel free to get going.
All right, you ready to start the meeting? Call to order. Start with the roll call.
All right, very good. Sherwood,
Here.
Vice Chair Spring,
Here.
Tony Bevel is absent. Ruth Ann Rusnak,
Here.
Mike Smith,
Here.
Chris West,
Present.
and Tiffany Yant is not present tonight. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, so we got approval of the minutes. Did anybody have any revisions or corrections to the minutes they wanted to point out? Okay, me neither. So
I move that the minutes be approved as presented. Second.
okay, how do we vote? Do I say something now?
Yeah, just ask for any further discussion.
Okay, any further discussion?
No.
All
Okay,
right.
now you just, all in favor say aye.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Ask if there's any opposed,
Any opposed?
and there you go. That's what you do every time.
All right.
All right, great.
All right, so now we got business. Follow up this on the traffic calming discussion. Is this something you're gonna lead
Yeah,
on?
so, and I apologize in advance. They're working on our roof, so if you hear a loud noise, that's what it's coming from. But I just wanted to give everybody a chance for any follow-up questions or anything from last month's meeting on traffic calming. I know there was a ton of information that you got. You have copies of a lot of that, if not most of it, in your binders. And as far as I know, everybody has picked up their binders. So this would be your chance if you want to just spend a few more minutes. We've got both Bob and Julia with us again. And if you have any questions about all that information or traffic calming in general, we can take some time to go over that.
I have just one question. I went the back route the other day from Sherwood over to Wilsonville, down Baker Road, Bachman, etc., over by the Villebois development. And they've got a couple roundabouts there that are considerably smaller than the ones that we have in Sherwood. I was just wondering whether the size of the roundabouts is dictated by the municipality or the size of the road or whatever, because those roundabouts, they're tiny. You got to slow down for them. Whereas the one here in Sherwood, some of them are so large you really don't slow down very much for them. So is there any rationale in terms of the size?
Well,
Bob,
I
can take this.
yeah. What you're probably looking at is classified as a mini roundabout. Now, mini roundabouts are usually for residential areas. You don't expect to see truck traffic going through it. So they're not designed for, collectors and arterials. Most of the ones that we have here in the city of Sherwood are basically on collectors. So the one down on Langer Farms Parkway, the one down on Oregon Street, the one that's going in at the new high school, those are all on collector and higher status roads. So they're designed to be able to take a larger volume of traffic and larger traffic. I would say that compared to the ones that are over on Villebois, down in Villebois and Wilsonville, take a look at the ones at Meineke and Cedarbrook Way off of the highway there in Sherwood, and you will see some of the smallest roundabouts that you could possibly get. And are they sufficient for large trucks? No. They do allow smaller trucks, buses. School district gets the bus through there, but they're designed for that. They've got a rollover curb and an interior apron that is going to see a lot of use. But generally speaking, the roundabouts are designed for the traffic volume and the size of vehicle. So it's a technical issue that comes up during the design of these things.
And I guess the bottom line is they're not set by the jurisdiction; they're set by the design.
Yeah, they're set by design. There are some minor elements that the city can prefer, but generally speaking, the design, the technical review and analysis of the traffic analysis, that pretty much dictates it.
Thank you, Bob.
So I have a question for the chief, and you probably don't have any hard numbers, but I just wondered what the trend in officer traffic ticket issuing's been over the last couple months. My gut would say people aren't out and about as much, but we've also staffed up so we have more coverage. And I just wondered, we're going to be seeing a bunch of citizen complaint forms or input forms. I don't want to use complaint, but I just wondered what your officers were seeing on patrol, what the trend is.
Yeah, so the numbers are down. As a result of COVID-19, we took steps to limit exposure for the officers and the community both. And so we kind of put a moratorium on self-initiated activities, multiple activities to include traffic stops for that reason. Probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, we removed that moratorium and provided the officers with their own discretion. So we're kind of in that middle ground. We're not expecting people to make traffic stops, but if they're comfortable making those traffic stops, they can. So definitely citations are going to be down as a result of that. So the photo enforcement, automated enforcement is still active at Tualatin, Sherwood, and 99. As far as I know, it's not active at Sunset because of the construction. It hasn't been relocated and turned back on. But as far as the officers go, yeah, those numbers are going to be down just because of COVID.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We're working to get Tony connected, by the way. Any other questions related to the traffic calming?
I'll ask one. Are there any items that were on that list that the city is strongly opposed to? Or are they kind of all on the table on a case-by-case basis?
I think they're all on the table on a case-by-case basis. I don't recall, except for the speed bumps. I think we wanted to explain what those were and why they're not preferred. But everything else is on the table, right, Bob? Was there anything that we had massive concerns about?
Well, a speed bump versus a speed cushion. Now, a speed cushion,
right,
is a different animal, and I've done those in different cities, different places. So I've got a design that I know works. It's a question of where they want them placed, where the citizens and the city want them placed. Generally speaking, we don't want to do anything that reduces the emergency response time on our major thoroughfares. So collectors and arterials are going to be just right off the top. They're not going to happen. And then the neighborhood route and the residential route, that's open to discussion. Right now, everything is on the table. Like I said, technically, I can make anything work up to a point, but make sure you understand that there's a big difference between a speed bump, which does not allow pass-through emergency traffic to pass through it without having to hit the bump, and a speed cushion, which does allow it. So generally speaking, everything in there is basically approvable.
Well, I've seen the
I have
speed
a
bumps.
question.
Okay, I'm sorry, Patty, just a second. Go, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I've seen the speed bumps that have the cutouts for the wheels for the emergency vehicles. Are those off the table as well?
No, that's a speed cushion. That's a speed cushion. The speed bump is like what you normally would see in parking lots. They go across the entire lane, and you have to go over it. And no matter where you go over it, you're going to hit it. So a speed cushion is set up so that there is a channel for emergency. It's set for emergency traffic vehicles, particularly fire trucks, to be able to go through without having to hit any of the speed the speed bump, basically.
Okay, and maybe it's just a matter of definition, but I thought the speed cushion was basically a speed bump that had been flattened out, so it was wider.
It's a combination of the two.
Yeah.
I would prefer, if we were going to do something in the city of Sherwood, I would do a speed cushion that has the valley gutters in it so that the tires of the emergency vehicles, fire trucks, could make it through. I wouldn't necessarily put in a full ramp system for a speed cushion. That I see as an issue, especially for emergency response.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the things that I would suggest is that the vernacular and the semantics of these can become pretty important, right? And so do your best to review the material and get a good understanding so that when somebody makes a request or we're discussing these, we can hopefully eliminate some confusion. But Bob and I will always will be regular staff, or well, let me rephrase that. Bob and or somebody from engineering, and I or Captain Carlson will be regular staff and can always help clarify those, so those types of things for you. Okay, Patty.
Yeah, I had a question first regarding the difference in cost between the old-fashioned speed bump and then the cushions, and then how will that play into the decision? And then my second, it's more of a comment. Up in Bull Mountain, Tigard area, I think it's down 150th or perhaps it's 141st. It's the older subdivisions on the top of Bull Mountain where a lot of folks cut through to get to Shoals Ferry. They've put in they're older neighborhoods and they've got the old-fashioned speed bumps and they're huge and they really slow things down. However, I was just curious regarding the cost differentiation between the two and what would be the most beneficial for the city and the taxpayers as well.
Any system that takes more physical labor to install it, make it look like it is in the standard detail, is going to cost you more. Speed cushion will cost you more. It's just going to take more labor to do it. A full speed hump type thing where it's extended versus a speed bump is going to be more expensive just because there's more material related to it, more effort to put it in the ground. So just a matter of what we do with each one of these things. There's also advanced warning signage that has to go up for these things. That's a part of it. So the stuff that I gave Chief that I hope he put into the manual also gives you relative costs for all those items on a one-to-one basis. It gives you a range. But generally speaking, if you think about a speed cushion, which has, it has advanced signing, it has the workmanship to make the channels in it. It does have a certain amount of material that has to go in. Where it does go in, it has the existing surface actually has to be ground down a little bit so that we can put in a thick enough layer that it won't break out. So there's some additional costs there to have the existing asphalt ground down to provide enough thickness so that we're not just putting a thin layer of asphalt down that's going to peel up under loading. So there are some construction issues with each one of these things that raise the price. Just a regular speed bump, well, to get everything done, it's not going to be cheap by any stretch of the imagination. To go full, it's going to be expensive.
Okay, my next question is, do we have a budget in place for just specifically these speed bumps? Because I know if you shop around, for example, on Uline, you can see traffic calming and slowing options. And I know that's not at the city level. However, I'm just curious if we have a particular budget that we're going to be pivoting off of for these particular speed bumps.
Well, the city manager prepared his budget, which was approved last week,
Mm-hmm.
and it has $100,000 for traffic calming.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically, for lack of a better term, that's kind of your guys' checkbook.
Okay.
So, that can break down lots of ways. That can be a lot of signs. That can be one or two speed cushions. That could be the down payment on a major modification to a roundabout, right? So, I mean, it all depends on the project that you're talking about. But the good news is there's some money budgeted so that this committee is not going to be hamstrung by, we think this needs to happen, but where do we find the money? So again, staff will help you keep track of those costs and what there is and isn't. And that is a starting point. So with a year's history under our belt, in 10 to 12 months, we may realize that 100,000 is too much, right enough, or, just about right, or maybe not enough. And we'll try to budget accordingly. But so yes, there is money to start with that.
Okay. I just want to make sure we don't get gung-ho with a bunch of speed softening cushions versus speed bumps and have that be the tangent and then find out, well, that only covers, 3.
Right.
Or, because there's so much to be done.
A couple other things to remember is that we're going to, when I say you as a committee are going to probably in the next month or two need to finalize a list of traffic calming options that you would recommend to city council. Now, most of them, that's going to be no-brainers, right? You're not going to need to put on there no parking signs. I mean, if the area requires that, then that's easy. But relative to the whole speed cushion and the significant physical improvements, you're going to need to look at the types of things as a committee that you believe are appropriate and acceptable for Sherwood, and submit those to council. Will help you get that done for them to kind of sign off on. And I can tell you that it's probably not going to include every type of physical roadway structure, right? You're going to need to settle on probably, for example, speed cushions when and where appropriate. but not speed humps or other types of things, because they're not acceptable to first responders, right? I'm the old-fashioned speed bump that you see that's a big chunk of asphalt across the middle of the road. I'm not a fan of those because they're not good for our vehicles. The fire department does not like them. They don't approve of them. So conversely, the speed cushions that Bob is describing with the valley cutouts at the right diameter, or the widths for the tires on the, the fire trucks and at least maybe one of the police cars, those are going to be much more acceptable. So it's going to be strictly defined what you're going to do and not do. So that's the first caveat. The second caveat is, obviously, with things that have that great a cost with them, you're going to need to recognize that those are probably going to be extremely limited options, not only because of cost, but also because as we continue to develop as a committee and you continue to look at different requests and look at the data that staff provides, I think what you're going to find is that people may request a speed cushion more than what is actually appropriate, or they may request them in locations where they're not appropriate. And you may have to say no based on those criteria, right? And so we're going to help you work through those criteria. But obviously, you all recognize that every time somebody asks for a speed cushion, it's not going to be granted for any number of different reasons. So
I have one more question.
yeah.
Will the city be providing like an itemized cost list of each parameter we might be utilizing, like signs and?
Yeah, you should have that already. I think that list, there's a list in your binder.
Yes.
That kind of gives you an idea of what those different options cost. From probably the cheapest would be some kind of curb painting, all the way up to, if you decided whatever, just hypothetically that a present intersection or a roundabout or something like that needed to be physically reconfigured. Now you're talking about anywhere from $150 to $250 to $300,000, right? So
I'm just not finding it. That's why I asked.
So, and it's a range. I mean, because any specific design fix is it's gonna vary a little bit depending on the location. You might need more signage, less signage, more striping, less striping.
So there's not like an itemized list anywhere then?
No.
Well, I mean, I think there is a sign is going to cost X number of dollars per sign, but you don't necessarily know how many signs you're going to need.
Julia?
Do you know where because I'm looking through it now in the binder.
So
It's in a section called Traffic Calming Toolbox. Section F.
Okay, because I've got traffic calming measures. Okay, I'll continue looking. Thank you.
Hey, Jeff, if I might put in some information. Certain things like the signage, Public Works has given us those prices. We know what a sign generally costs. We can give you a range of costs for the asphalt or concrete work. But it's always going to be predicated on current conditions out there, and prices of materials can go up drastically. And if it's a municipality with a limited use of this stuff, you're going to buy it by bulk for a full road improvement. That's different price than what you're going to get for a small speed hump for asphalt. And we pay a premium just because we're a municipality, and those change over the years. So that's why there's a range of prices. We try and fit it within the range so that you get an idea, but can we actually put together a list of, it's going to cost this much to do it? It's going to be a guess if we do that, and it's going to be a low, high guess. And so we'll fall somewhere in the middle there. Okay,
because I'm looking and I'm unless I'm completely blind, I can't find an itemized list. I mean, even just I would suggest that just for
information. If I'm not sure, did the ITE traffic measures make it into the manual that you have?
I have traffic calming fact sheets, traffic calming measures, municipal code 2020, and transportation system plan.
This would be you would be able to tell what it is because it has ITE at the top right corner, and it has a range of prices, which is a national range down at the bottom of the sheet for each one of the traffic calming measures that are identified there. And then regionally, we would have to mess with it a little bit because nationally, you get everything in there from the deep south to the Chicago to everything. So it just gives you an idea, though.
I'm sorry if my question seems redundant. I just feel like we're pivoting off of a particular budget this next year, and I just want to make sure it's beneficial. The decisions we're making.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into this, Patty, and the other thing that you have to keep in mind is if the committee approves something that has significant cost,
sure,
even let's say it's $30,000 and it's within the budget, it's a several month process to get the project scheduled, bid out, and then timed based on what time of year and the weather and so on and so forth. So there's a very real possibility that you may approve or make recommendation, and a project may get approved based on that recommendation, and that project doesn't get completed until the next fiscal year, right? And so what was maybe questionable whether we had enough money budgeted at the time, that may be a problem that becomes null and void 4 months down the road when we finally get around to getting the project done. So there's so many factors involved, and the cost, while important, should never be the key factor in whether you decide to complete a project or approve a project or not, right? If something comes to this committee, and Chris, I see you have your hand up. Thank you. Something comes to the committee and you feel like it needs to be done, the city's going to find a way to make it happen. So I don't want you to worry so much so about cost that it's going to say, well, this really needs to be done. The data suggests it needs to be done. Staff agrees, and we recommend that it be done. But unfortunately, we don't have the money, so it's never going to be done. That won't happen.
Okay.
So, Chris.
So I just wanted to get an understanding of process. So we get a submission from the public about speed on a given street, and we do our due diligence. We get staff input from the staff support, and we recommend an expenditure of, let's say, $50,000. That's a recommendation, correct? It's not, we're not saying go spend the money. It's got to be signed off by a responsible official, probably whoever Joe is delegated to, correct?
So the city has financial policies that lay out each person's spending authority. And so for using your example, that would fall under the city manager's spending authority. So if your recommendation was to have that project completed for $50,000, staff would forward that recommendation to the city manager. And if it was within budget, it was within his spending authority, he agreed with the recommendation and didn't see a need for more information or anything else, then the project would move forward. He would authorize staff to get to work on laying out the bid work and so on and so forth and get it done. Now, if it exceeded his spending authority as city manager, it would need to go to city council like any contract. And I think it's like $150,000 or something. would need to go to city council. So, so that's how the process would change. Hey, Tony, good to have you with us, buddy.
Okay. An idiot. Okay. Thank you, Angie. Appreciate it.
So that's how that process would work. And of course, if it's a much less level of expenditure, you know, even if it's $500 for signs, it's probably not going to be near the process. It may likely still get a nod from the city manager, but then boom, it happens, right? I mean, department heads can make that happen. Craig at Public Works. And so generally the process is you're going to make a recommendation, but I can tell you that your recommendation is going to carry heavy weight because that's the intent of putting the committee together.
Thank you.
In equal respect, your denial of something is going to carry the same weight. If you review a request and you gather data and you go through your process and you determine that what's being asked for doesn't meet the proper criteria or whatever the case may be, then that denial is going to go back to the individual and say, you know, sorry, but the Traffic Safety Committee has determined that speed humps or speed cushions are not the appropriate response, and we're going to work with staff to try to address the problem in some other way, but you don't get your speed cushions.
So to follow up that, with the inquiries or complaints that you guys have been getting over the years that resulted in the creation of this committee, do you get people saying we want speed humps on X street, or do you get just we have a speeding problem?
We get all the above.
Okay.
To include, we have had people submit requests for speed humps, cushions, unit, whatever the case may be, because they don't always know what to call them either. And Bob will look at it and say, no, it's the wrong type of street and not going to happen. And we tell them that. And but the difference is we tell them that as a city staff employee. And so then we could be met with a bit of resistance or whatever. And the beauty of this committee is that it's fellow citizens that are reviewing the data, and it's a body as opposed to an individual that says, look, we've reviewed it everything and it just doesn't meet the criteria. And so we're sorry. Tony.
Yeah, you can build those speed bumps, speed cushions, any height at all, can't you?
Well, yeah, we had a little bit of conversation prior to you joining us, but there's several different objects out there. And so this committee will have to kind of determine that, you know, which option is going to be viable. And I think staff input at this point is that the terminology speed cushion is going to, it refers to a specific design, which I think, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to be very limited in height. I mean, it's going to call for a certain height, a certain width, and that's it, without a whole lot of variance.
Most of these items that control traffic are prescriptive in nature. We dictate, we being the engineering community, traffic community, get out there and they do all the type of analysis and reports and tests needed to provide a standard design that will do what it's supposed to do. And changing a height requirement is not going to happen. I'll stick to AASHTO and IT standards all the way through because I know they work. To go beyond that puts a lot of liability on the city for doing something that is non-standard.
Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, sure. I was riding my bike through Lake Grove, Lake Oswego yesterday, and they have all kinds of speed bumps, cushions, and I didn't get off my bike and measure the height of them. But why do other cities have speed bumps and cushion, and we're behind?
And what was the last thing you said?
And why aren't we using these speed bumps and cushions?
Oh, so obviously we can't answer to why other cities, the decisions they've made and how their process has changed or whatever, but
I mean, you're
so
using
the
tire
interest
rubber.
in the topic of conversation relative to speed cushions has been around Sherwood for quite a while. We've never had a formal adopted policy on what we will do and whether we will do them or not. And so speed cushions, if you will, are kind of the poster child for why we needed a traffic safety committee in the first place, among there's other reasons, but is to establish that policy and that consistent practice that they will or won't be used, and they'll be used in what criteria and so on. And so that's what this committee is going to determine. And moving forward, if the request comes in and the criteria is met, they'll be installed.
So how many people does it take to request a speed bump hump to get the city to act?
One.
I'm there then.
Well, so that takes us to the process conversation. But anyway, I mean, there's been multiple requests, but most requests that come in don't meet the criteria, right? Because people want to put them on a street because there's too much traffic, and the reality is the street is a throughway or connector, and it's supposed to handle a certain number of traffic. So that's where all the data comes in, right? So it's not an automatic, hey, I want to put it on my street. And I'm not necessarily using you as an example, Tony, but I'm just saying throughout the city, there's lots of streets and roadways where speed cushions aren't appropriate and the criteria would not be met, and we wouldn't put speed cushions there. So that's where all the data and the information comes into play about the type of roadway, what's the actual vehicle count, and so on and so forth.
So it's an open subject.
Yes.
By that.
All right, any other discussion on traffic calming before we move on to the draft forms?
I guess the one thing that I'd like to pitch, and we talked a little bit about it last meeting, and that is if we could get the professor from University of Portland to share or work with us a little bit. Several of us have been through that numerous times, and I think it would give a good basis for our deliberations, at least some important stuff besides the staff expertise. So I would ask that the chair and staff would consider that for a future meeting.
So let me follow up really quick on that, Patty, before you go. So a couple things that Angie's going to help me remember is I want to make sure that we have the material in your binder that I'm thinking we do. There could have been some oversight on a couple things. And then secondly, we will follow up with Dr. Takalu and try to get him scheduled for next month if he's available. If not, then we'll have to go out from that point. In the meantime, I will send out an email looking for specific bits of information that you might like to get from him. And I'll explain that more in the email, but I'll try to set the stage for his time so that we can, try to have him for an hour and a half and make it the most useful, best use of his time that we can without him having to worry about a presentation, and rather he can kind of focus on maybe a few specific questions and topics. So, Patty.
I was curious, is there any way we can start something immediately to create some kind of like sign campaign or to let folks start getting involved to kind of appease? the community. Today I was over by Southwest off of Beaverton Hillsdale, and I drove through a couple neighborhoods, and they've already, they have the 20 is plenty little yard signs. And I just feel like with summer approaching and the 4th of July right around the corner and the kids outside playing, and folks seem to be laxing a little bit with the COVID regulations, I just think getting people on board and excited about the fact that the city's working actively on something with this committee, and that would provide a inexpensive way to reach into the community and let people feel involved immediately instead of like 6 months down the line when it's winter and we're all back in our houses and what have you. Because everybody's going to be outside more and more as summer progresses. So how would we start something like that immediately?
You just did. So I will, again, Angie will help me. We will get that on the agenda for next month. And so That's what your budget is for. And I think a traffic safety campaign would be a great thing for this committee to start with.
Mm-hmm.
So all of you give that some thought. And I think probably the two topics that are the low-hanging fruit are speeding and pedestrian safety.
Mm-hmm.
So we can, for just a few $100s, I'm sure, or $1,000, we can have some signs made up that we can put out that would deliver messages about speeding and pedestrian safety. And then they can say, brought to you by your Sherwood Traffic Safety Committee. And then we can also, put the web address for the form on there.
Mm-hmm.
We can do lots of things to kind of get the word out. And I think that's a great idea. So,
and I'm open if need be, if the city is busy or what have you, I'm open to reaching out to local sign makers and what have you to get the ball started and then feed it back to whomever will be delegating it from the city position, just to help, I figure, less man hours or what have you.
Yeah, we can follow up with that. And
okay. It was just a suggestion either way. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's our job. So I appreciate the offer but we can do that. But in the meantime, be thinking about the message has to be clever, right? And so again, that'll be another email that I'll send out looking for ideas that folks may have about what that message may be,
Right. Because 20 is plenty.
Watch for pedestrians or, look out for people or whatever. So yeah, we can definitely get started on that.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Mike.
I was interested in hearing from, and I'm sorry her name has gone away, but the fire chief that was going to sit in on our meeting.
Kate Stoller, we've sent invitations for both last month and this month, and so I'll have to check in with her and see what's going on, if there was some problem with her connecting or what, but.
Yeah, well, and my interest is just as we go through these potential traffic calming options, I'd kind of like her feedback on why they do or don't like diagonal diverters, or, what their vehicles, what they can take and what they can't take, and why this works and why they feel that doesn't. It would be nice to kind of get an educational aspect from that point.
Okay. That will be another action item.
So, Chief, do we have access to what other cities, speed humps, speed bumps, and what the fire departments, would like to see or don't want to see?
I think in your binder, you should have the document from TVF&R. Is that true? Yeah, so that tells you what they can approve and will approve and what they will object to. And I think they're limited, if I remember right from looking through there, they're limited to the speed, what we're defining as speed cushions, which are wider with what Bob described as valley cutouts for their tires to go through. So it's wide enough for the fire trucks, but not for cars. So cars end up going over the raised portion and the fire trucks are able to get around them. That's, as far as I know, that's the only thing that they approve of.
All right, you ready to move on to draft forms? All right.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen here, and this form should show up. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is very generic. It has not been finalized. Angie will make it look all professional and pretty when we're done. But this is just a basic input form, right? So people fill these out and submit them. They'll submit them to staff. We'll receive them for you. And this is what you guys will see. So what I want you to do is just kind of go through this and tell me if you feel like it'll have the information that you need, absent data, that we'll get for you to make decisions. So that starting at the top, just an introductory paragraph that talks about the fact that the committee exists to review and consider the requests regarding traffic safety. City staff will review the proposed requests and forward it to the committee for formal review. Contact with the applicants regarding the request will be included in the review process. And they're welcome to attach as many additional sheets if they want. They can take pictures, they can draw maps and diagrams. They can add additional text if they don't have enough room here. So with name, address, phone number, and email, we need some way to follow up with them, whether they want to use phone number or email. And then they need to give us the specific location or the intersection. As these come in, staff can provide an initial review. And if we don't feel like there's enough information, like if it says, on Borchers, well, we're on Borchers, right? So we can follow up and say, can you give us more specific location? And then obviously there's a spot there for them to describe the nature of the traffic problem that they're concerned with. And number 4 is to describe what actions, if any, they feel would make the situation better. So that's kind of their ask. We want speed cushions. We want no parking signs. We want this end of the street blocked off, or whatever the case may be. And then again, any other reminding them again to attach any photographs or diagrams that document the problem. So I didn't reinvent the wheel. I took a form that I found that Newburgh had, and I kind of tweaked it for us. And my intent is to create a form that will work for anything. I don't want a stop sign form and a speed cushion form and so on and so forth. So hopefully this will be one form for everything. So any questions or comments on that first page?
Looks good to me.
This is Chris. I remember from Police Advisory reviewing the different cities that had stuff going on, and Newburgh was the cleanest and made the most sense to me as we reviewed that stuff. And I think this is open enough, but can garner enough information that we can, if need be, or staff can follow up, but that we can ask staff for data and information to help us make a determination. It's nice and clean and simple.
Anyone else on this page?
I
Okay.
have a question, Chief.
Yes.
I wouldn't make the email optional.
Okay.
I would say they need to list an email.
Well, I've done stuff with other public involvement, and there's still a portion of the citizenry that, one, doesn't have email or isn't willing to give it out. So we can ask for it, but boy, I can tell you with a lot of other public outreach, it's pulling teeth.
Yeah, I just think with the optional in parentheses, I think if it just says email, then folks that want to put it in will put it in, and folks that don't won't. But if you put optional, perhaps it may persuade some to just not put it in because it's just optional and they're just, trying to get through it so quick or what have you. Just a thought. Either way.
Actually, it's a good thought, and I agree with you, and I agree with Chris. And if somebody objects, they can just say NA or leave it blank. But we'll go ahead and remove that to try to encourage people, if they have one, to give it to us. And I'm sure Angie has that noted. Okay, page 2 is really kind of our response page. We'll just put on there the date that it's received, who received it. So that could be, February 2nd, received by Angie Haas, Jeff Groth, whoever. And then after it goes to committee, this will be the final determination. If it's approved, and Julia had some questions about how this works out, which I appreciate. So if this needs to be cleaned up, we can certainly clean it up. If it's approved, who is it assigned to? So, for example, if the request is about a speeding problem and you agree that the data suggests a speeding problem and you approve their request for action, because some of these are not going to know, they're not going to know what, they're just going to get people to slow down, please. You may approve it and assign it to the police department, and that's what it would say, approved, assigned to PD for enhanced enforcement, whatever. It could be approved, assigned to city manager, public works director, as the case may be. Denied, if you take a look, you receive the request, you ask for data, you take a look at all the data, staff input, and you determine, for example, people will say, hey, there's too many cars speeding down our street. And you'll say, well, let's get the speeds. So we'll put out the traffic tubes, we'll gather the data, we'll review it, bring it back to you, and you all look at it and go, wow, there really isn't a speeding problem here, which has happened numerous times. It's a perception issue, not a speeding issue. Then you may deny it, and reason for denial, problem doesn't exist, whatever. And then, of course, we'll follow up in all cases with the requester. And then open, I suspect there could be situations where the request comes in, we look at the initial data, and we determine that we really need to do more investigation. And you may say, hey, Bob, we need a full engineering study on this. And so the request is going to remain open pending further review, engineering study, whatever the case may be. So I just figured that may be a potential, so we'd have that there. And then once it's closed off, it just seemed logical that it would be signed off by the chair before it's filed away. So any questions, comments? Julia, please jump in on that if you want to address the questions you had before.
I don't remember exactly the questions I had before, but just a question that I have looking at this now is, this is my planning world hat, but approved with modifications. It might be that what they asked for isn't the appropriate solution, but the committee finds that something else will, that there is a problem and that something else will solve it. So you might want to have a box or something to note that the committee took a different action that isn't deny or open or approved. Okay.
So you had a couple comments. One was about that the formatting seemed off, probably because of the box, checkbox, and then the sign tos. I don't know. And then the second comment was more like what you just addressed. You want to provide additional room for additional information. And this sounds like an approval denying, but what about them recommending funding for larger types of projects? How will that work or be conveyed? So I think that's what you were just covering.
Yeah.
Could we perhaps check a box or create a box that has like follow up? Like following up on or to be determined, just to keep folks in the loop, like we're working on it, but it hasn't been completely decided upon yet.
I think that's open and pending.
Open pending.
That's
But
what it
something a
sounds
little
like
bit
to me.
more like decisive regarding it's pending and we're working on follow up. Or
Well, keep in mind that these forms do not go back to the person. That's not their intent. So I didn't design it so that we would return the form with the answer on it.
okay,
We will reach out to them, staff will, and say, hey, via email or phone or whatever, and say, hey, committee reviewed your request, they approved it, you can expect to see action, or they denied it for the following reasons. Certainly this form is public record, and if they wanted to see the form, they could certainly see it. But as a course of, general rule, we're not going to be sending the form back to them. It's going to be for our purposes. So that's important to understand. But clearly, I think we can improve this page a little bit and have more options. So staff will take a crack at that and come back with that next month. So any other comments on this page?
Yes. Is this an online form and where it says approved and assigned to and denied? I think perhaps Julia addressed that. There is going to be more space to put more response than just that one little line?
Yes, so the form will be online, and so they will only need to fill out that front page. And then the second page will say city use only, right? So we can make that in a shaded box or whatever, so it's obvious that they don't have to worry about it. But yes, then we'll add some more room for some more response under the city use only.
Thank you.
Chief,
The other thing I would add is that I did this and not Angie. Had Angie done this, it probably would have been closer to the final project. So product, I should say.
Yeah, regardless, Chief, we're impressed.
Any other comments on this, Chris?
Yeah, this is Chris, and I want to follow up because my issue was the same as what I heard Julia. And that is there's kind of an in-between between approved and denied. It's where we acknowledge and agree with the problem, but we recommend a different solution. The denial, I think, is where there isn't a problem or there isn't a solution. But, again, speeding, for example, signage enforcement, those sorts of things, speed trailers versus a speed hump in a narrow residential street that it just ain't going to work. But we recognize that there is a problem, and enforcement is, and maybe the trailer or whatever. So I'm looking for a gray between approval and denial.
Okay. Very good. Good suggestions. Anybody else?
So I might suggest that this form be used to track comment or the issue that comes in and then the decision that is made, but not used to track interim steps along that decision process that might occur. And maybe an issue log could be something that is used to track issues that come in. So every time you get an issue, it goes on a spreadsheet that says, you know, who brought it to and the topic. And that's something that we could see on a monthly basis to see where are we at with these particular issues? Have they been resolved or not? Are they still pending? Or have they been denied or approved or whatnot? And then say something takes several months to get through the process of getting data, reviewing the data and making a decision. At the time that the decision is made, then this form would come back up and we could check it approved or denied or whatever the interim, option might be and sign it and move on.
Yeah, actually, that's not only a great suggestion, but I'm happy to say we had already kind of thought through that a little bit. So yeah, we'll definitely maintain a spreadsheet, and it'll definitely be something that'll be reviewed by the committee each month, because you're exactly right, Jason. You may approve something, and in the months that it's taking to come to fruition, you may get 2 or 3 more complaints on the same thing. And it'd be nice to be able to reflect back if you didn't remember that, oh yeah, we're already addressing that with this one. So yeah, we'll definitely do that.
Yeah, so I might suggest that the pending go away from this form, because I think checking it open and pending and signing it kind of feels like a final activity, and I'd rather pending just be taken care of through the log, and then a final decision and signature on this form be whatever that decision is that's made. Especially if this isn't used to go back, we're not sending this back to the person that complained. Seems like the action that is checked off and signed is kind of the final action.
Okay.
I mean, that's just an idea. Because otherwise, if you check it open and pending, are you going to create a new form when it's approved?
Yeah, I see your point. Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to think of we're gonna need to develop a system where items that come in and get closed out, right? We're gonna obviously have to have a closed file, and then and on the spreadsheet it'll reflect those items are closed, and then we'll have an open file, right? So closed could be approved or denied. And then open are going to be those things that the committee is continuing to work on.
Yeah. So when I was in Newburgh, we would have an issue would come in, and if it was it would get assigned a number. So 20-01, 20-02, whatever the year and a number, and that could be tracked. And just like you said, you close them out when a decision is made, and they remain on the log as pending until a decision is made. And this form be used to memorialize the decision that's made.
Yep.
So two other questions or comments. One of the benefits of having for example, a stop sign request form is it's an opportunity to provide some education along with the form. Frequently requests that I had seen when I worked in Newburgh was the problem statement is people are speeding. The solution is I want a stop sign. And stop signs are not, in Newburgh, we didn't put in stop signs to control speed. And so it was a quick denial. And with that education piece where they read through it, they could, if they choose to read through it, they could see that the city won't install a stop sign to control speed. And maybe it would turn them to come up with a different solution or not to submit it at all. I like the conciseness of this and having one form for everything, but maybe over time as it's developed, we could add like links or something on the fillable form page on the website that say, are you requesting a stop sign? Click here for a quick fact sheet on stop signs. So if they choose to, they could educate themselves a little bit more on whatever measure they think that they want to install and how the city feels about them or when they're used or not used.
Yeah, I like that link idea. That's a good idea. I think that's something we can do.
And then my last question is it in the code that when this decision is made by this group that notice go out, preferably before a decision is made? For example, in that case that was brought up earlier, one person requests speed bumps. We review it and we say, yes, put in speed bumps. Is there a process that's going to send out notification to everybody within, say, 500 feet of that intersection or where that speed bump is going to go that allows them to provide additional comment so that we could see, is this one person's issue that everybody disagrees with, or is this an issue that is widely agreed would be solved by speed bumps to help us make decisions?
Yeah, there's a couple answers to that. So I think when that request comes in, the first thing that would happen is that you all as a committee would probably want to know, is this one person out of an entire neighborhood, right? And so that may be data that you ask us to obtain, and we could go out and take a survey or somehow reach out. So yeah, certainly that can be part of the information that you're looking for. Secondly, if a decision is made to install some physical component on a roadway, whether it's a speed cushion or a redesign, a cutout, or whatever the case may be, the city already has very strict, procedures in place that are going to be followed regarding what requires notice and so on and so forth. Julia could probably, or Bob could address that better, but those things would automatically come into play as necessary and required.
Okay, thanks.
Anything to add, Julia, Bob?
Not really. I think the level of outreach is going to depend on the type of project, and yeah. I mean, it's not a land use notice, so there's not going to be that 500-foot notice type thing that you were referring to. But depending on what it is and how much information is already known, that will guide the additional outreach that's done.
So let me give you thank you, Julie. Let me give you everybody. Are we done with this form? Can I stop sharing?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll give everybody a fairly recent example. We got a request to limit parking on a short section of street in town, generally in the neighborhood by where the new high school is going in, off of Hanley. So data was gathered, staff did their part, provided the report in the study and all that. Before the city manager made the decision, we posted, I don't remember exactly how, but we sought input from the area and the neighbors in the area to see, what their thoughts were, whether they agreed with it or so on and so forth. And then the city manager made the final decision. So we can do the same thing if, in those types of situations where the committee needs to know what people feel about it, we can certainly put that notice out and seek input from folks. So very, very doable.
Thanks. So when does this become live? Do we have to wait till next meeting to approve it after you?
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and make some adjustments and come back. We may potentially send out a version, but my hesitation with that is, again, we can't have dialogue via email. So sometimes, even though it takes longer, it's just better to stay away from that, because then mistakes don't get made. Nobody's going to intentionally do it, but we all make mistakes. And then next thing you know, I get caught up on an email. We have a discussion that's broken out, and now we've we've committed a public records, public meeting boo-boo. So probably best we'll just bring what we think would be the first final draft for your approval next month. We've got plenty of other things to work on as well. We also have next month, I'll probably bring in some complaints that or some issues that we've kind of got hanging out there to allow you maybe a little bit of discussion and review and kind of see how that process would work and what it might feel like. So that's kind of my plan at this point. So,
Chief, will you give those complaints out prior to our next meeting so that we can look at them?
I can, yeah. There just can't be any dialogue, but what I can do is let you know where they're located and what the gist of the issue is. And that'll give you folks some time to maybe go out, drive the area and take a look and see what it looks like to you. And yeah.
When an item is on the agenda that somebody has a complaint about, do you let them know it's on the agenda and give them an opportunity to come in or log on, whatever the case may be, and speak to their issue?
Yeah, so as long as we're on virtual, they'll have to watch it on YouTube because we have to follow specific guidelines that have been set forth for virtual public meetings, and they don't allow for guests to attend and have dialogue. So citizen comments have to be submitted in writing 24 hours in advance, but they can certainly watch live on YouTube. Now, once we get out of this virtual world, which, it'll only take a few more months. So when we only meet once a month, there won't be that many meetings. Then they can come in and they can provide citizen comment. But there will not be dialogue. I would not recommend dialogue with them about if Mr. Smith comes in because he submitted an issue and you guys are going to be the committee's going to be discussing that issue. I would not recommend anybody saying, oh, well, I know the person's here. Do you have anything to add? Because that's just has a tendency to turn the meeting into a real circus. And so, but they do have the opportunity to have provide citizen comment. And at that point, they can say, hey, there's one more thing I want to throw out for you guys to consider on this or whatever. But so, yeah, that'll be how that will work once we get back to normal.
Okay, thanks. Any other discussion on the forms? All right, we move on to citizen comment. Do we have any for this week, this month?
No, I did not receive any citizen comment requests.
Okay, well, that's it for the agenda. Does anybody have anything not on the agenda they want to discuss? All right.
I guess.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Tony, or Jason, one of the things that I shared at the Police Advisory Board meeting last week is seeing all the speed radar trailers out and about in the community over the last month or two is a good thing. That awareness and enforcement is how we change some behavior, and having those out and about in the trouble spots, I think, is good because many times we don't realize that we're going 43 when it's 35, those sorts of things. So I just wanted to do a shout out to the PD for getting those things working again and out and about on the roads.
The Portland University professor that the chief was talking about, there is a YouTube video from 2 years ago and very informative. It's long, a lot of facts and figures, a lot of numbers, but it's really good. Really opens your ears and makes you think. So you might want to watch it.
Thank you for sharing that, Tony. And thank you, Chris. And just for the whole committee, those radar trailers are a tool, right? So you all, that's going to be something that's in your toolbox, depending on the nature of any speeding issue or whatever the case may be. You could certainly say, hey, we order the radar trailer out for 2 weeks or whatever, and we'll make it happen.
Chief, what is the what's the inventory on the radar trailers?
We have
How many do
two.
you have?
We have two.
Patty?
Can we get one on Roy Rogers? Please? It would make the city a lot of money.
Do me a favor and send me an email so I don't forget.
Okay. I'll just hang out by my fence with a radar gun.
Well, wait a minute. You said make a lot of money. These are educational only. We don't issue citations off of them.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah, they just tell everybody how fast they're going. But
No, that's even better. Gentle reminders.
yeah, actually send the email to Captain Carlson.
Okay. Thank you,
He's
Chief.
the one that will make sure that that gets out there. And we have a list, so it may not happen right away. Right? So
Right. No, we appreciate that. Thank you.
So Julia, where on Roy Rogers do you want it?
Patty.
Oh, I would like it right.
Oh, Patty, beg your pardon.
I would like it right on the intersection of Roy Rogers and I believe it's Lindley Way. Is it Lindley? So there's Lavender and then I think it's Lindley.
Yes.
I feel like right between that, there's about 3 blocks where folks from the stoplight kind of punch it. And it happens often at night and then they'll just open it up and it's 35 and they're going 50 easy. And so I think gentle reminders would be good, especially with the road work that's going to be coming eventually. It might deter people.
Right on.
Yeah. Anywhere along there, to be honest.
All right. Anybody else have any other things to say before we end? All right. Anybody object to adjourning the meeting?
So moved.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.